Hey guys, welcome to The Bottom Half is Red. I'm your host, Barron Longstrath, and I am excited to bring to you a show that is going to give you some thought-provoking discussions. It's going to give you some expert insights to both encourage and some practical steps for how to build an organization that can more effectively introduce the world to Jesus Christ. So what is The Bottom Half is Red? It's all about building a culture of excellence. It's about growing your unique and creative identity. And it's about carrying out the will of God at any cost. So you're going to see that through practical teaching tips, developing a culture of giving, creating branding and marketing, or even methods to help guests feel safe and welcomed. This podcast is going to have you covered. But before we dive into today's episode, I want to take just a moment and extend a special invitation to all of our dedicated listeners. If you're looking to get even more involved in our community and gain some access to some behind-the-scenes stuff, become a Patreon supporter. And you can find that link in the episode description or even on Patreon. Just visit The Bottom Half is Red. Listen, we can't wait to welcome you on board and to share this exciting journey. Now, let's jump into today's episode. So I'm sitting in the studio right now with our executive producer, and I just wanted to give a short synopsis of what this part of the episode is going to be about. So initially, if you heard the first episode, this was supposed to be one episode. If you heard the explanation on the first episode of these 3 episodes, then you heard our executive producer talk about how we decided to break this into 3 episodes, and I think that was a wise decision. But in this episode, you're going to tap into the fictional side of the books that we brought to the table, and I think you're going to particularly like how that the idea of fiction is capable of stretching you, what it does to the imagination, how beneficial it can be to you as a person, and how fiction is able to play into ideas, imaginations, creativity. So stay tuned. You don't want to miss out. Listen thoroughly, and I hope you enjoy not only the books that were brought to the table, but some of the side pieces of the conversation of what we discussed in this great episode.
Moving on to our fiction books, What did you bring for fiction?
So you guys are going to hate me on this, okay?
I was guessing like The Silmarillion, Two Towers, The Hobbit.
I knew you would.
And that's one of the reasons I did not bring those for my fiction book.
Yeah, I have them all over there, but I didn't. You know what I did? I brought the book that started it all for me. And it is a 1927 original book by, and you'll know the author, Franklin W. Dixon. He wrote, and then I guess, Dave, you would know, they just basically used the name and they started writing and then attaching the name for. But back when it was the OG, I read The Tower Treasure, and that was my first book I ever read in my entire life.
The Hardy Boys, for me, that brings back memories. I had this little tiny library that was right across the street from me, and I loved reading that. In fact, I was in there so often that the librarian got annoyed with me and showed me how to use the computer system to order from other libraries, because I was like, hey, can you order this for me? Hey, can you order this for me? I was like 7 or 8, and she's like, come here, sit down at the computer and order it yourself. And so I would have Hardy Boy books coming in from all over the state of New York just because like I couldn't get them anywhere else.
Yeah. I'm not going to get nostalgic to the point where I'm going to be crying here. But that book started my journey into being an avid reader. And it took a few years. Like I consumed a lot of books when I was younger. And then I went through a period where it was like a lot of sports, and then went to college, and it was all about I'm not like Rustin. I'm not like naturally smart. or Dave. Dave is like that too. I have to work at it. These guys sit at the table and use F3 pens with fine 3/8 inch and all. I'm just like, I'm using crayons, you know, that's my life. I'm a crayon
From the
user.
restaurant.
Yeah, exactly. I'm like a Longhorn crayon kind of guy.
Not even Crayola. It's
No, it's like the off-brand one.
it's made of candle wax or something.
Yeah. So I have to really, really work at it. But that book got it started for me. And it was just the adventure of it. It was the creativity of it. It was the fact that I could be transported somewhere. And I got to imagine what they look like, what the tower looked like. I got to imagine the car buzzing down and them coming up on the scene and, you know, who it was that was really the thief and how they cleared the name. I mean, I remember the detail. I can remember the smell of that book.
Which character in that book resonated with you the most?
I don't remember if it was Joe or his brother. I don't remember. I know it wasn't Chet.
Yeah.
I mean, I was definitely one of the Hardy Boy, but I don't know if there was essentially like one or the other. I was just mesmerized that these kids were able to like crack the codes.
Yeah.
When their dad was the one that was really the detective, and it was just that. It was the fact that it took me to a place that like a television show couldn't take me, a movie couldn't take me. It was this imagination. Like I was there, I was a part of it. I could see it through their eyes. That was what was cool to me. It's like I wasn't looking in what would you call that? Like a third person? Mm-hmm. Is that what you would call that? If you're watching somebody operate? Yeah. So I wasn't there. I was there. And that book is the one. So fictionally, I've read hundreds of fiction books, and I'm a big fan. I think they highlight, if you're a communicator, don't be afraid to read a fiction book.
Yeah.
I encourage you to do so, because it'll help you with your imagination. It'll help you with creativity. It'll help you to sit down and concentrate. You'll be warped into an area. I mean, obviously read with the intention of realizing you only have so much time. So don't waste time, you know?
I feel like fiction, it makes you a better communicator than maybe nonfiction would be, because part of the purpose of fiction, the author wants to entertain you. They want to entertain you and hold your attention. And I mean, sure, in nonfiction, they want to do that as well, and they want to pass information along. But I feel like there's maybe a little bit more artistry that goes on like with the language than perhaps something that's just a recounting of events. And I mean, we could get onto the storytelling of like The Boys in the Boat, of where that's a nonfiction event.
Yeah, there's something about it. And another thing it does is just helps you like stay in one place.
Yeah.
You know? And I think obviously we can start splitting hairs and talk about the differences in generations and how different it might be to communicate to them. But there is something about the ability to sit down and something grip your attention for that long. And even if it's not real, it is real. The experience is real. The information is real. You know, the storyline might not be, but the way you process it, the way your brain works, the way that it exercises you is real. And so the benefits, even nowadays, Landon and I went through a series together that was, I mean, I would have never, ever listened to this series, but it's basically about the end times. Mm-hmm. And it's not, what's that famous one?
Left Behind.
Yeah, it's not that. But it brings to light like the end times through a fictional standpoint. And it was written so well. Mm-hmm. So Landon listened to it twice, like in 2 or 3 different years. He listened to it, and then a couple years later listened to it again. So, but there's something about it.
I think that fiction is something that highlights the fact that we are in fact created in the image of God, because what it is you say that it's not real, but when somebody goes in there and somebody reads it, this entire world, this entire universe becomes real. And so that author has done on a small scale what God has done in reality, and he has brought something that was not into existence and has placed it in your mind. And we probably all of us sitting here at this table, we have our fiction books that we like, and these characters, they'll live and they'll be alive, and you could see something and you know how the character would respond to that because you've connected with them and they've become real to you.
I appreciate what you said about the art of writing,
Yeah.
that is apparent in fiction. There's something to be said about the author inciting a feeling in you or a response from you just by the way that they word things, and a response that they intended to incite just by the way that they put the words on the paper. I read Stephen King's biography on writing. He just talks a little bit about his writing process, and my fiction book is not a Stephen King book.
So what is your fiction book that you brought?
Fahrenheit 451.
That's a good one.
By Ray Bradbury. I think it was written in 1959. But the gist of it's one of those dystopian novels, right? I mean, you've got your 1984's Brave New World. But this one is more along the lines of the consequences of a society that chooses to be uninformed and satiated through entertainment, and the lengths that a government will go to keep, what would you call, free-thinking people a relative force in society. So it follows this guy named Guy Montag. He's a fireman, but in that book, firemen don't put out fires, they burn books. Right? Mm-hmm. 451 is actually the temperature at which paper burns, which is what I found out later. But this whole book is his journey from mindlessly burning books into questioning why are they doing the things that they do. And the parallels from that book to today, they're pretty apparent. They're pretty staggering. And so I would say for me, just the way that it was written, just the use of language it immerses you in the story. You're there, right? You're seeing the pages burn, if you will. You're feeling this conundrum that this guy is having with free thinking versus just going along with what you've been told. It's not like the movie. I didn't like the movie.
So what was your favorite scene of the book? What was the one that really grabbed you and pivoted things for you?
I'll tell you, I remember it vividly. I remember it. This is the part I remember. It was sort of towards the climax of the book, but turns out this guy, and I don't want to spoil it, but it turns out this guy, Guy Montag, the main character, you don't find out until later, but he's actually been harboring books and hiding them in the vents in his house. And so he's morally torn about this. He goes into his fire chief's station, right? And his team lead is a guy named Beatty, right? He is the lead. He's the head of the firemen, and Guy sits down, and Beatty knows that he has a secret. He's been hiding something, but instead of calling him out on it, Beatty starts jabbing at him with literature, an essay written by a guy named Poe, and he's hammering him with these questions from this essay, and Guy he's not read, so he doesn't know what he's talking about, but he has to constantly get up and wash his hands during the meeting with this guy because he feels, I would say, a guilt, because he knows that what he's been doing is against what he's been taught, and the fire chief is bullying him into admitting what he's done. But he's got this old English professor in his ear telling him, calm down, I know this essay, let him say his piece, right? And I'll say my piece later. And it's a whole scene, it's a whole debate. I gave you the gist of it, but that scene in the book, you're there. You're listening to it or reading it, and you're feeling nervous with him because you're like, oh, he's got something to hide, right? And so I would say that's one of the beauties of fiction. It's the ability to incite a response from you. One author said, I don't want you to just know there's roast beef. I want you to smell it. I want you to be able to taste it. I want you to, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like, that's the book that probably comes to mind when it comes to impactful fiction.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of relevance on like censorship and role of technologies and stuff like that. It's an incredible book, and it's a big warning about like the censorship and what we choose to like try to shut down. And I think that the book or the message of it is particularly applicable to us as Christians, because we have to be very careful, like in society, that we can want to stack laws or things in a particular way that favor us but we forget about the fact that like the tides turn, the winds change, and now the rules and the laws that were made very restrictive are now going against us. And so I'm of the opinion that freedom is better than restrictions. But those are just my 2 cents, and nobody pays me for my opinion. My fiction book is called The 47 Ronin. So it's fiction in the fact that it's a dramatized, or it's based on a historical event, but there's a little bit of like embellishment as far as like maybe the dialogues of what happened or things like that. It's a story of honor and loyalty and revenge. Basically, in 18th century Japan, there's this lord, Asano
Keanu Reeves.
Yeah, Asano Keanu Reeves. The book is so much better. So Lord Asano, he's slighted in court. There's like this greasy, grimy court official that offends his sense of honor and sensibility, and he's just forced by his honor to act. Well, he doesn't actually end up like killing this guy, but the emperor comes down hard on him and requires that he performs ritual suicide. Well, his 47 samurai are now masterless, and so they become Ronin. And it follows the whole arc of its covert operations at its best. Like, they're dispersed into the countryside, and they've got to undercover communicate with each other, and they end up doing like this daring attack against this official and avenging their master.
Well, to me, there's something about that honor culture anyway.
Yeah, it's like this whole Bushido honor culture.
Yeah, I think the reason why I get morphed into books in that era, or even like maybe like pre-World War II, is because I can appreciate, whether it's fiction or nonfiction, I can appreciate the code. You know what I mean? Even some of like, even older. And I'm not saying that they were righteous, but I'm talking about like the understood codes and of that governed maybe, or at least more morally governed at these times. But I just love like being immersed in that kind of culture. I've never read the book, but I'm interested in the concepts of it.
Yeah, it's not a very long book. As far as like an audiobook goes, it's less than 8 hours, and so it's not a very long book at all. But it's just that, like you were saying, that whole cultural, historical context of like a warrior life, the sense of honor, and the fact that they were willing, that they knew avenging their master, their fallen master. I mean, nowadays, like, we could very easily be like, you know, he's done, let's just walk away. Like, cut our losses, walk away. Instead, they were all willing to forfeit their own lives to avenge the memory of a guy that wasn't even around anymore.
So was this show, it sounds very interesting. This shows that I know nothing about that, but you said that they were samurai, but they became Ronin.
Yes.
No, it sounds from the offset, does Ronin in the book and maybe the culture, does it have a negative vibe to it, a connotation to it?
So Ronin means masterless.
Ooh.
And so it's these samurai that were the height of the Japanese culture.
Right.
They were, I mean, aside from obviously like the emperor and stuff like that.
Right.
Like, that was your highest calling that you could be if you could become a samurai. And when they lost their master, they become Ronin. And so a lot of times, like, culturally, they would turn to like banditry or thieving and stuff like that.
Wow.
It would have been very hard for them to like make their way in society, because you think about the problem that they've got all of this training.
They've got all the same skills. It's just they don't have
a master.
Yep.
Wow.
They don't have that legal authority guiding them anymore.
There's something down in there. I'm going to have to get a hold of that.
It's a good book.
So Dave doesn't say I stole his essay.
No, it's all good. That's my fiction
I
piece.
like it.
I've got so many fiction pieces, but so one of my favorite books, though, I asked you last night, is called Without Remorse. Without Remorse was written by Tom Clancy, and it follows this guy named John Kelly who becomes John Clark, and he's just a bad dude. And this is an archetype for every thriller story. Like,
Yeah.
This story is what every thriller story should be. The revenge, he's got out of special operations, and so he's trying to mind his own business and retire, and he comes across social injustice, and he tries to help somebody out, and he's been hurting from his own loss. He tries to help somebody out. This person is taken away from him by basically a drug cartel. And so at the same time, he's been contracted to come back and help rescue these POWs from this Viet Cong prison. And so he's simultaneously going back and forth between helping these Marine recon guys train for this event and coming back to Baltimore and waging like absolute guerrilla warfare on this drug cartel. And it was an incredible book that, I mean, Tom Clancy's a master story writer.
Yes, he is. No doubt about that. What a great episode. When we're dealing with the concept of fiction, and we're wrapping things up here. First off, thank you for allowing us to just share how important this content is. And it really is important. And we've all been sitting here, and some of this stuff's going to be edited out, but we've all been sitting here talking about the concepts of Genesis and how that we were created in the image of God. And fiction gives us this opportunity to really kind of enter into that highway of creativity. I mean, what else, or what other species, I should say, has that opportunity to really create like we do? And the fictional concept is so important, and we talked about it. I can't help but think I've raised 3 boys. One of them is still in the process of being raised. I guess they all are. But the youngest, I still have the opportunity to really invest a lot in him. But let me close out on this final thought. I can remember all 3 when they were younger. We would, buy them some kind of great gift, and we'd pull it out of this gigantic box, and we would think that the money that we spent on this Christmas gift was going to be some, memorable thing that they'd carry into their 80s or 90s. And just to see them jump into the box and go into this world of fiction. And we didn't have to tell them. We didn't have to create it for them. We didn't have to manipulate it for them. They were there. They were barging across the desert in a tank. They were blasting their way to the moon. They were making a clubhouse, or whatever they were doing. They were in their own fictional world. And our desire, as we sit here today, is to help in a world that seems like is ever growing less and less in the realm of imagination and creativity. Dive into something that helps spark yours. Fiction can do it. Enjoy it, grab a great book, and dive into a world that's awaiting for you to be creative with it. Thank you so much for joining us on The Bottom Half is Red. Listen, I hope you have enjoyed your time with us today and gained something of value. If you love what you heard today, please do not forget to subscribe to our podcast and leave us a review on your favorite podcast platform. This helps us. Your feedback is incredibly crucial, and we want to improve on what we're doing and to bring you the best content possible. You can find us on Facebook, look us up, Instagram, even YouTube at The Bottom Half is Red. Hey, be sure to check the episode description for any links to any resources that we have mentioned during the show. You don't want to miss out. This podcast is a production of The Church Today here in the great city of Tulsa, and the executive producer is our very own David Tandera. I hope you've had a fantastic time, and we look forward to having you with us again on our next episode of The Bottom Half is Red. We'll see you then.